Hey y'all, it's Maritime in America again, podcast where we're charting America's offshore stories. It's the only podcast that highlights mariners' perspectives on issues facing the offshore community and the greater U.S. maritime community. I'm your host, Aaron Smith of the Offshore Marine Service Association. Each Friday, I'll bring you the Offshore Briefing, a quick rundown of the week's notable developments, updates, and news you need to know in the offshore space. In addition, we'll feature a special guest from the maritime world, bringing a mariner's voice and real-world perspectives straight to the show. Joining me are my co-hosts, Ashley and Angelle, where we'll strengthen the maritime American mariner's voice by diving into the people, policies, and powerful currents shaping the U.S. maritime community. Whether you're on deck or at your desk, we're glad you're here. Welcome. This is the inaugural episode of Maritime in America. And with me, I have Angelle Johnson and Ashley Smith, two of my great coworkers here at AMSA. I'm really excited to launch Maritime in America. I've been in the maritime industry in some capacity for about 20 years now and have really had the pleasure of talking to mariners directly for about a decade. And I've just become fascinated with the stories they have, their histories, the great experiences that they have. And I've realized that we needed to tell those stories. But I've never really had a place to do that or a medium to do that. So, I've been watching podcasts and realized that this would give us a great opportunity to get their stories out and to show why this is such an amazing industry and one that everyone should have the level of love that I have about this industry. Well, maybe not that much, but a great appreciation of this industry. With that, I'm really happy to start this podcast and really excited and cannot think of anyone better than our first guest, who I'll introduce here in a minute. Angelle, you're kind of new, have a fresh perspective to this industry. What are you excited about?
I'm excited to hear about the different stories. The maritime industry and offshore specifically has been long. So I would like to hear how the different generations experience different things with all the progression and evolution that has come.
Well, that's cool. You're right. And you come to us with a little bit more of a fresh perspective, which is great to have. And Ashley, what about you? You've been in this industry for just about as long as I have.
I was about to say, watch your transition from fresh perspective to not so fresh perspective. Yes, I've been in the maritime industry in some capacity for over 15 years with AMSA. Let's see, just about 13 years. It's been a while. I can say that I love the maritime industry. It's family oriented. It's fun. It's supportive. It just really is. It's a great industry to be in, and I look forward to hearing everyone's stories and getting to meet people that I didn't otherwise know. But and like I was chatting with Captain Spaid, my main goal of this podcast though is to keep Aaron on key and to keep us focused in the right direction. And he doesn't go on into any nerdy sideways or anything.
Preventing nerdy stories is going to be impossible. So you should set a lower bar here. This is our first
I'll try my hardest, but that is my goal. And to get everyone hyped about all that AMSA has to offer. Our events, going back to how fun our industry is and supportive. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up too.
Well, definitely support that, and great to hear. And we have a great first guest today. When we started about starting a mariner-focused podcast, I knew who I wanted to have as the first guest here, and it was one of the mariners who I know has a great experience, a great story to tell, and who, quite frankly, I've worked with on the record before, so I knew we could trust him to be on the record. So that was why we invited Captain Rick Spaid. I also know his full government name, so I can hold that against him in case he wants to try to tell any tales out of school. But I know Captain Spade, Captain Rick, as I call him, has been in the industry. He's been offshore and oil patch industry since 1980. And I know he's been on the boats, as we say, since 2010. Has been a captain since 2012. So it is a great pleasure to introduce my good friend, Captain Rick. Captain Rick, welcome.
It's good to be here. I appreciate the invite very much.
Well, Captain, tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm sure I gave the listeners a little bit of your history, but you can do so much better than I. So tell us about yourself.
It's without getting too long-winded. I was born in Frankfurt, Germany, and shipped back to the States when I was 3 weeks old. I was born in an Army hospital and grew up in the Army. My dad was a retired lieutenant colonel. By the time I got out of high school, he had retired, but most of my life up through then was bouncing all over the world, literally. We were in Kyushu, Japan. We spent 3.5 for a year. Spent 3.5 years in France, went to French public school where they didn't coddle American students and speak English for us. We had to learn French. So, and kind of merged into that culture as well. It was great education. We came back from Europe when I was 11 and a half, and in that every summer we got more education. My parents took my sister and I to see the Louvre. We saw the Tulips Festival. We actually got up to Loch Ness, but Nessie didn't come out, and we really got to see a lot of Europe, Colosseum, Leaning Tower of Pisa, bullfighting in Madrid. So it was a very extensive education outside the classroom, which made the classroom that much more interesting because we could put flesh on the bones, if you will. And then somehow I ended up in the oil patch. In 1980, actually January 1st, I went offshore for the first time. Not a very proud position, but I went out as a galley hand so I could get to see what was going on because I had no prior knowledge of the Gulf of Mexico experience. I'd done some sailing in Florida and in New York and Massachusetts, but as far as an industry, I was totally unaware. So I just grabbed a job, went out there, and ended up in 1980. I think I had 5 different jobs. Every one of them was a raise. At that time, things were blowing and going, as they say. And, people just, like, oh, you're a worker? Come over here. We got a job for you. And they'd offer a little more money. I ended up in 81 with Otis Engineering, which was one of Halliburton's subsidiaries. And ultimately ended up spending about 7.5 years under one Halliburton umbrella or another, and ultimately working directly for Halliburton. Along the way, I ended up working for Penrod Drilling, which is mostly Ensco. Ensco bought their assets. I don't think there was any legal connection between the two, but Penrod was the largest independent drilling contractor in the petroleum industry at the time worldwide, and it was privately owned. It was a good company, and drilled a lot of holes.
Yeah, they have. Well,
And
how'd you get to the boats then?
what's that?
How'd you get to the boats?
Well, got laid off from Halliburton again in 2009, and I remember looking over the side of the platforms time after time, going like, I'd really rather be on the boats. I just always wanted to have a captain's license and be on a boat. And finally, I realized, I'm not getting any younger. It's not going to get any easier to do the deck time that's necessary. So at 58, I jumped on the deck, and 2 years later, I got my license.
That's
And
awesome.
it's been going ever since.
That's quite going to the deck at 58. That is not the usual history, but
No, no.
I love
But
your
it keeps
story
you
about.
young because you got to keep doing stuff.
I like the story of how you say you had 5 jobs and 5 raises in 1980, and you have worked up from galley hand to captain now. Um, you know that's an amazing history there, and I love that part of our industry, that there is that path where you can start in the galley, or you can start on deck and you can work up to the wheelhouse. I love that about this industry, and that's one of the reasons that I really think it's supportive. Um, so you're coming to us today because you were driving through town. I understand. You know, tell where are you going, where are you headed, where are you coming from?
Well, I live just south of Lafayette, Louisiana now, but I have a sailboat in Gulfport, which I don't get to play with very much because I'm working a lot. But it's a Cal 40. It's a legendary
Nice.
racing sailboat. It's sitting in the Gulfport Marina, and it needs a lot of work and attention. But we've gotten it out sailing a few times, and she sails like a witch. So she's well worth. I only paid $8,000 for it, so it's not ocean ready, but it's ocean capable. So we've
We
got a
should have
little.
done the podcast out there on the boat.
I,
We did
I like
not
that
think
idea.
this. We did not think this through.
Oh, I know.
Maybe down
Uh,
the road we'll do one
Yeah.
out there on the boat.
So
yeah.
we'll recap.
No, I love that. So, when did you get off of, well, not your boat, but when did you get off of the boat that you worked on then?
Um,
When
let's see,
did you crew
last
change?
Tuesday, a week
Last
ago
Tuesday?
today, and I'll be going back either Tuesday or Wednesday this coming week. So we work a 28 and 14 schedule,
Well,
which
that's,
is making it very difficult to get the work done on my boat.
but I love that. And I think that's something that this industry, that too few people know about this industry, is that when you're working in, you do have 14 days of time that are your own. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. And that's a benefit. Um,
It is,
so,
but it goes by really quick. A lot of
oh, I
people
bet.
talk
Yeah.
about 14. Oh, you get 14 days off every 6 weeks. Let me tell you, when you're gone for a month, there's an awful lot of stuff to catch up on when you get.
Yeah.
I bet. I bet. Um, so, I know knowing you, I know that you were in the army before you went offshore, and then you were on the rigs, and then went to the boats, and have now even been on YouTube. So, but what's kind of, is there a single part of it that is all that ties it all together, that is all kind of brings it together, or are they all separate parts?
I'll be honest with you, Aaron, I'm not sure how to answer that. It all ties together, I guess, because it's on the water.
Hmm.
Um, I've I did work in the mid 70s for a couple weeks as a student summer job in a oil processing plant out in Utah. Um, that's the only prior oil field experience I had before 1980. So everything I've done, 99% of it at least, is water related, either in the marshes in Louisiana when I was running wireline for Otis Engineering. We caught a few truck jobs. Okay, that's land, but
Yeah.
our shop was still an offshore focused shop, offshore or marshes. Water was involved. So I guess that would be the thing that ties it together. The oil industry and drilling and production are very different from running a boat. We're carrying stuff to them now, but quite frankly, most of the people on the boat really don't know what the equipment does. There's just, what to call it, that's what that is, but how it functions and the downhole stuff, that's a whole nother
Hmm.
talent, if you will, as well as a whole different set of engineering issues.
I've always found that too, and I don't think that a lot of people understand that as much, is that they just talk about, the offshore industry, and think it's all the same, but it's really not. But, I think for the listeners, talk about what boats you've worked on, and what they do.
Sometimes the seas are actually better in deeper
Hmm.
water than they are in close.
Yeah.
I've run little jack-up boats in the marsh doing wireline. I've run crew boats. I worked as a DPO on 1,600-ton boats with Harvey. And I've done a lot of utility, utility boats, which don't have all the fancy dynamic positioning stuff that we have on a lot of the boats today. You actually had to know how to drive the boat, which is, it's a skill set. And it only comes with time. It's not something that, I don't want to say not everybody can learn it. An awful lot of people can learn it given the time and exposure, but it does take a certain talent as well. Like anything, it's just not for some folks, and it is for others.
It totally does, and I've seen that myself, and have experienced that myself. Where there are certainly people, and in fact, in this industry, I think that sometimes we think about the dynamic positioning system too much, and not about hands-on chrome, managing the manual controls like you should be able to do. And it's not something that it is tactile, it is muscle memory, it's using all of your senses at once. And I think that's very cool part about this industry and what I love. But for our listeners, talk a little bit about more. You said you work on a supply boat, but explain more about what that is on just a daily basis. Yes.
Well, the one I'm on right now, for instance, is 200 foot long. There's a real good book out there called The Rise of the Cajun Mariners, which actually describes how we ended up with this style of vessel. The Cherami, I think, came up with the boat truck. And basically, the idea was a boat truck, like a pickup truck with a bed in the back and a cab in the front. And that's what we see in the Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America today is we've got a cab up front, the house, the quarters, and got a big long deck in the back, like a big pickup truck.
Yep.
That's basically the style of most supply utility boats. They started out with fishing trawlers. They started out with anything they could get their hands on that floated back in the 40s and early 50s. And these other styles of vessel evolved as they figured out, hey, this will work better for what we're trying to do. We're not fishing. We need to carry cargo. We can only put so much on the front of a little lugger. And that worked okay in the marsh. But, once we started going into a little bit deeper water, even the continental shelf was deep in its day. And of course, it's not now. We're in a lot deeper water. The systems have changed. The downhole stuff has changed. But the boats have changed as well. We don't have little luggers carrying a couple barrels on the front of the boat. Now we've got big skid units sitting on the back of the boat. Our deck is 38, 39 feet wide of usable deck. And I'm not sure, but probably a good 75 to 80 feet. I'm sorry, 170 feet of deck lengthwise. And you've put an awful lot of cargo in there. Plus, there's tanks for various supplies that the rigs, drilling rigs, or production platforms need. There's lots of tankage downstairs, as well as the engines and the engine room, engine systems.
Yes, and I think so. Talk a little bit more. You said you got the tanks underneath the back deck there, and said drilling mud in there, I believe. Anything else that you're carrying in the tanks?
The boat I'm on has not done a methanol job, but they also have methanol tanks, which are separate. And to be honest, I don't know what the methanol is used for specifically in the wells. I know they used to jet wells in with nitrogen, but methanol is a whole different thing. I think it's to break up, it's to make it flow better, I assume. But actually, that's not something I really need to know as a captain.
Yeah.
But the guys working on the platform, of course, they do. Methanol is very flammable, so you do have to be careful with it. It's a different product.
Yeah.
Drilling mud could be oil-based, could be water-based. You may have both on the boat at the same time. Obviously, you need to keep it segregated. And the boats that I'm working on have a system in the mud tank system, delivery system, where you could have two different products in your mud tanks and they're not going to get commingled, which is very important.
Well, and so then how do you transfer that liquid cargo to the rig then?
Pumps and hoses.
And
Basically,
how long, are those hoses, is that half mile that you connect
no,
or
no,
how long
no,
is
no. They're most platforms are in the range of about 80 feet off the water, so they'll have a hose that they'll drop down to the boat. We put the boat on DP, which is a whole nother subject we can get into.
No,
That's where
that's
the
where I need to
computer.
step in. Nope, nope. You do not let Aaron start talking about DP. That's where I have to step in.
Well, I'll just say that mostly what I do is run the computer that runs the boat, and that's it. Aaron, you can't talk.
We only have a certain amount of time, and he will take all of it.
Yeah, we could spend hours on how a dynamic positioning system works, but basically, make it short, you set the boat up on DP, which keeps it within a meter or less, even despite waves and everything else. The computers are very busy. And you hook the hoses up. We've got zero drip, secure connections. And, when everybody's set up, you're doing job safety and environmental analysis prior to, and then you hook everything up. And when everything is tested and checked, you start pumping. And you pump the drilling mud or whatever completion fluids, whatever they need to them. And it could be fuel just as well. Also, we've done that at Horn Mountain.
And I think, but the point I'm making here is that I don't think people understand that when you're pumping fluids, you're right there
In the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, you are
On high seas.
Yes,
On the
You're
high
very
seas.
seasick.
within meters of a platform, and that you have to, obviously, you have to keep it from hitting the platform. And I don't think people understand that, you are connected by a hose to a platform, and that hose is not half a mile long or even 500
No,
meters long.
no,
It's 80 foot long. Yeah.
it's a little more than 80 feet because you do have a little bit of slack, obviously, for safety reasons, but you're probably not talking 200 foot of hose.
Yeah,
It's
and
somewhere in
that's
between.
amazing that you can hold that tight of tolerances.
Or the computer does.
Yes. And yes, exactly.
And in back in the day before DP and the computers were put on the boats, yes, you had to manually hold the boat. Of course, it was a little more variance, if you will. And then weather becomes a big factor. So you're constantly paying attention to the weather, what's coming, what's here now. Are the seas so high that we can't hold position? So this is not a safe thing to do, either from a human safety point of view, assets getting potentially damaged, or the environment.
Yeah.
You don't want to spill.
Yeah.
It's very important.
And no, I don't think people understand how much thought goes into that planning, into, are you going to be drift on? Are you going to be drift off? Hopefully you're drift off.
If you lose your systems, then that becomes critically important. Are you going to drift into the asset just simply because you lost your propulsion systems? In a lot of cases, obviously drift off is preferred.
Yes.
But that's the other thing with the DP2 systems is you've got redundancy, and this is a safety factor that I'm not going to go very deep into because
Ashley, thanks you.
And Aaron's
yes.
going to put a little tagline that says osvpa.org for more information.
Yep.
But the DP2 systems have redundancy in thrusters and in positioning data. We use satellites, we use radar, we use side scan, which is a fan beam reflector, to keep the position of the boat very tight.
Yeah.
There are other systems that we don't use, but people use in certain, like taut wire in shallow circumstances. And again, now we're getting way too deep into it all. But bottom line is, if you lose your redundancy, you still have safety factors in place. But at this point, because you've lost your redundancy, you start disconnecting any hoses, any connection, you stop any cargo operations with the crane, and you start getting out of there. while you still have propulsion
Yep.
and get away from the asset to save any damaging or safety issues.
Of course. And I know that,
It's pretty complex.
it is. And it's amazing that we have built this industry that is as safe as it is. That, the offshore industry has a TRIR that is lower than almost any other transportation mode out there. That is really cool and amazing to me when you consider how fraught this is. But we talked about the liquid cargo that you do, but you also mentioned the deck cargo. What sort of deck cargo are you moving?
Anything and everything. I've carried subsea trees on crew boats from Greens Bayou in Houston to Theodore, Alabama, outside Mobile. It took up a good bit of that deck, but it was 20 feet wide, 25, 30 feet wide. Well, not 30 because the boat was only 31. It took up a good bit of the width. To carry that on a truck, you'd have to shut down the interstate completely. It's just not feasible. And, I mean, I don't think it would even fit down I-10, for instance.
And
Well,
it's cleaner
exactly.
to move
And
it on the water too.
well, and as
What's
as
that?
our
But
subsea
it's cleaner.
tree expert Ashley can
Oh,
tell us, a subsea tree is what again?
I don't know. All I'm picturing is the one time I went to a simulator when you were talking about DP, the one and only time I've ever done the simulator. I had to leave the room because it was so realistic and the seas were so rough. I was getting sick.
Yeah.
oh, in a simulator. Yeah. Yeah, some of them
And
are
like
pretty good.
just the boats in general, just out there, like the whole time you're talking, I'm sure my face was turning green just because I just can't.
Well, for all of our Ashleys out there, a subsea tree is basically a wellhead. It
It
It's
is
is
a
not a
wellhead on the
tree.
bottom of the
It is
ocean.
not a tree out there that I just I always envisioned, but it's not.
it does.
No, well, and
But
this Christmas tree term comes from the old roughnecks in East Texas
Mhm.
with the valves sticking out and various valves on the way up to secure and have
I did not
backup
know that.
valves in case this one went out. And it kind of looked like a Christmas tree, and some cowboy called it that, and it stuck.
it
I
really
did not
has.
know that.
It's such an amazing term, and yeah, people wonder what it is. But a modern tree is usually a square box, but
Right.
and it's still we all still call them trees, and it, it,
Still a
it is
Christmas
interesting
tree.
because yeah, you see an old one, they look like a tree, they look like a Christmas tree, but they've changed completely, but we're still going to use those old terms, and I love that. That is indicative of how this industry has grown because these terms follow us, even though
Well,
they just
drilling mud.
yeah, yeah,
Drilling mud, for
exactly.
instance. Some cowboy realized that all this cow slop next to the well they were working on, maybe they could pour that down the hole and hold the pressure back, and it worked.
Yes,
And
and
that's
now it is
that's
a
what drilling mud does. It actually is pressure control
And now
and
it is a complex mix of different
all
chemicals
kinds of
in the
different
right
chemicals.
ratios.
Got to get the
And
weight just right. Got to get the viscosity just right. Yeah, that's a science in itself. A whole nother podcast and a
look,
half.
some of them are patented. It is a patented chemical
Oh
mix
yes. Oh
that,
Okay,
yeah.
y'all are getting too nerdy. This is where my buzzer comes in.
well, let's
But I am
transition.
very
So
excited that I
you
know
have
about what
on
a Christmas tree, where it came from. Learning
Now
something
you
new
know.
every day.
you have on the
Everybody thought it
top
came from
end,
Germany, but no.
you
Nice
have the
little
on the
tidbits.
top end, you have a Christmas tree, but take it down to the lowest end. The lowest end of deck cargo. It's not all going to be Christmas trees. What is on
No,
the
in fact,
lower
trees, actually, Christmas trees is probably seldom what we do. We
end?
carried that one subsea tree that one time. Mostly what we're carrying when we're doing cargo is tote tanks, 500 to 750 gallon square fluid tanks, carrying either Jet A fuel out there so they can refuel choppers for the crew changes and supplies and stuff, small stuff, groceries, big,
Mhm.
big containers with groceries. And, they need scaffolding because it's a sea environment. It's corrosive. It's salt water. So Yeah, I don't care what you got out there, you're always, almost all of it's steel, and you're always combating corrosion. So you got scaffolding to get up underneath the heliports because it's got to get chipped and painted periodically.
Mhm.
So there's baskets of scaffolding. Maybe an engine that they have up there went down. Got to carry out a new engine, carry the old one into the shop to be repaired. There's just an awful lot of different stuff that
Yeah.
ends up on the back deck.
And that is so cool that I don't think a lot of people understand that everything that is used or consumed on a platform, and it gets taken out by your
You're in a
vessel or
remote
one very like it.
location. It has
Like
to
a
be
truck,
brought to you. Yeah,
Yep.
like the bed of a truck. You just bring it up. Yeah.
like the bed of a truck. Yep,
Um,
exactly.
but with that, and you mentioned, that you've worked on crew boats, and I think that you've probably worked on probably the most famous crew boat in the world, and because of that, you've kind of become an ambassador for the maritime and the offshore communities. And I'm sure that some of our listeners will recognize you from the Jones Act enforcer videos. So how did
I
you
didn't
come
have the
about?
beard back then, but it's still the same guy. Yeah.
You did not. So how did Offshore America become kind of a integral part of your life and your identity there? How did we come to know you through those videos?
Well, I went to work for Harvey International, and AMSA had chartered the Jones Act enforcer from them, through them, and we went up the East Coast investigating foreign vessels that potentially are taking jobs away from American
Mhm.
mariners and shipping companies, which is a violation of the Jones Act. The whole purpose of the Jones Act is to protect American shipbuilding, shipping, and mariners. Why is this important? Well, during World War II, they started Kings Point Maritime Merchant Marine Academy. It is just like West Point and Annapolis. It's funded by the U.S. government. And the reason they started is because they were losing so many merchant mariners in ferrying equipment to England. It's a vital function that what is it, 70% of the world is water. You want to ship
Uh-huh.
something, yeah, you can send it by air, but there's limitations on weight, there's limitations on fuel, and yeah, you're going to get it there quicker, but you can't take everything.
Yeah.
Yes, I know you can airlift a tank, but one at a time.
One of them. Yeah.
Yeah, if you need to get 1,000 of them over there, ships are going to work better.
Yep.
And the history of the merchant marine in the United States goes back. Of course, that's just one aspect. We need to train mariners. We need to maintain an American fleet capability, which is where the Jones Act comes in. There may be some tweaks that we need to adjust with the Jones Act, but we need something in place to rebuild and protect the American merchant marine and shipbuilding. I think I saw something recently where 95 or 97% of the ships built in the world today are all built in China. And I'm not going to sit here and bash anybody, but if we have to be able to build our own, and this goes back to the American Revolution.
Yes.
Benjamin Franklin got into it with King of England about the hemp production. And England wanted our hemp production because that's what they used for cordage on sailing ships. And no, we need it right here in the colonies for our own ships because we need ships to move material, to move
Hey,
food, to move everything.
you are right. It is as important, if not more important, than it was 250 years ago. And actually, I would say with how small the world has gotten, it is more important today.
Because an awful
So
lot of
we
stuff
do.
goes by water.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and look, we could, but it's going to be massively expensive. If we have a maritime industry that is only there to support the military, it's going to be massively expensive, and we won't be able to afford it. it is much better if we have a commercial maritime industry that the military can then springboard off of.
It's
And
exactly what happened in World War II.
exactly. And that's what we need. And so that is the importance of the Jones Act. But, I would also say, I take it even more base level than that. And that is that a company that has an offshore lease, it's not an offshore ownership. They don't
No,
own those assets. They lease them
from
from
the
the
U.S.
American
government.
people.
Yeah.
So therefore, I think the American people should at least have the right of first refusal for the jobs associated with the exploitation of those minerals or non-mineral energy resources. So, for that, these are our resources. We should get the jobs from it. And that's what the Jones Act says. And, I think both of those, the military and the commercial or fairness aspects, are equally important.
I'm here for all this nerdy stuff.
So this is the nerdy stuff you're here
Mhm.
for?
Well, because it really is so simple and it's so strange that people try and fight it or turn it around. Like that I just don't understand. It just is pretty, it's pretty simple and basic.
But it is,
It's simple and basic because we need to be able to carry our own
Correct.
stuff in the world.
And it's just,
Yeah.
it's
Let's
mind
face it.
blowing when people try and go against it or say something else or we don't need it or it's just, yeah. So that's what I'm here for.
Well, we went, let's see, 4,000 years ago, the Phoenicians sailed around Cape of Good Hope. They sailed around Africa. And that may not have been the first time. I think there's a lot of maritime history missing. But bottom line, the point I want to make here is that humans have used the ocean to travel and transport things for a long time to great success. The Minoans, they found a Minoan shipwreck in the Mediterranean. The copper on it assayed from Minnesota. It was 3,000 years old.
and I would say,
So we had
So
people
cool.
from there coming here way before Christopher got loose.
and I would say, I would augment that sentence by saying one thing. Some people have transported the oceans, and those
Yes.
people have been the successful ones. And if you outsource that to another group, you're not going to be successful. And that's why I don't want to see us outsource our U.S. maritime industry. But I do think I think it's cool and it's interesting, and I hope that you appreciate that, as a captain who started on the deck, not that long ago, in 2010, started on the deck in this industry, worked your way into the wheelhouse, and then the images that you captured, have been seen in some of the highest offices in this country. And I know that we have taken those images and shown what is happening offshore, in some
You're
certain
referring to the
buildings and
Jones Act
certain.
enforcer
The
work
Jones
that we
Act
did 2
enforcement.
years ago?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I think that is something that should be really interesting, because without those pictures, it's very hard for people to understand what's happening here, because
Yep.
you can't see your vessels operating.
No, it's
You can't
thousands of
see
miles.
them.
It's out of sight.
And we have all
Exactly.
those pictures uploaded on our website.
Not
Oh, okay. Cool.
not all of them.
And not all of them. So I'm
We
just
we
saying,
will
Well,
so
some
keep.
of them are
anyone,
pretty boring, probably.
well, so hey, if I don't think they're boring, then they're not. I'm just saying if the listeners want to know what we're talking about, it's all on the
Yes,
offshoremarine.org
offshore.
website.
Very good. Yes, offshoremarine.org. Yes. But, I got to spend a lot of time with you on those vessels as well. And, one of the things that I noticed, during my, during my time on board with you, was how much, you worked with Trent and Aaron, and John Rayfield and everyone on board. And really saw that you're not only a captain, but you're a teacher and a mentor offshore. Can you talk to me about that aspect of the industry and kind of what you think about that side of the industry, and why you do spend so much time teaching Trent or teaching Aaron or teaching John?
I don't think I taught Trent a lot. I think Trent taught me a lot about paperwork.
He's
He's
a
much better at it.
he's a great captain. Yes, I definitely
Very
agree.
good. And he actually had a lot more experience and capability with crew boats than I did. I started out, well, I first started out playing with those jack-up boats in the marsh. And after, when I got actually on boats as a boat hand, it was more utilities and mini supplies until
Hmm.
the last 4 or 5 years of graduating into the bigger stuff, which is nice. Rides better in the seas.
And it does.
I've always, when I went on the deck, I realized it was something that I had really wanted to do, work on boats or be on boats. It was like coming home for me. It's not that for some people. And I try to encourage, it's like, if you enjoy doing this, by all means, it's a great path. If you don't, figure out what you really like to do. Go do it. Don't worry about the money. Because I would have been on boats a lot sooner, except that they started out deckhands in 80 at $35 a day, and I could make $80 a day up on the platform. Well, that's a pretty good chunk of change, especially back at that time. But the lesson I learned that I try to pass on to others is I enjoyed downhole. I got pretty good at figuring out what was going on down there. You can't see it, much like you can't see what the boats are doing 100 miles away. But it's a different talent and skill. But I really enjoyed the boats. And frankly, in the long run, I'd have probably made just as much money if I'd have gone to boats, not initially, but over time. And I would have been doing something I enjoyed more than working on wells. I, it's just not a whole lot of fun to get covered with dinosaur poop when the well belches out raw oil on top of you. But that's part of that job too.
Yeah, understand. Um, so explore that even further. How then can we help the next generation see the maritime industry or the offshore energy industry as a lucrative career path, as a good career path, and as the high tech, high skill career area that it is? That this isn't,
Mhm.
Becoming very high tech.
yeah,
Whether you're on a boat with DP, dynamic positioning, which is some pretty fancy computers. We're talking $500,000 to $1 million systems. In fact, I think 10 years ago, the company I was working for had some new boats built over in Florida, which we brought around. It was interesting, but they had a elementary, if you will, DP1 system, had no redundancy. And that then was a $250,000 system, brand
at
new
that time.
at that time.
Yeah.
So we're probably talking north of $1 million just for the computer systems going in here. And you got to think about all the variables that system is getting into, which are the same variables that a captain has to take into consideration when
Hmm.
they're manually operating the boat. How bad are the seas? What are the seas doing to you? Which way's the wind? Where's the current coming from? You know, how much throttle do I need to give here to keep us from when the heave of the sea gets underneath you, is it going to shift you over or is it just going to heave you up and down? In different parts of the world, it's different. In the North Sea, you've got a lot of heave. They got 50-foot high waves, but they also have like really long periods.
Yeah.
We're in the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America. I'm sorry, I've been saying it wrong for decades. Takes a minute. You may not get, if you get a 50-foot sea, it's a major problem
Yeah.
because you probably got 8 seconds in between those 50 footers. It's a hurricane where different parts of the world, different seas respond differently. You have to react to that, whether
I
you're a
noticed
computer
that.
or you're a human.
I noticed that when we were offshore on the East Coast. I think you and
Very
I are
different.
both used to the Gulf of America, and the duration of the waves here, because
Uh-huh.
you're in a bathtub,
It's
and
choppier here. Yes, you're in a
that's what
bathtub.
I thought all oceans were. And then I get onto the East Coast and you have these long rollers.
Long swells. In the Pacific,
Yeah.
even more so.
I know. And so it's interesting to think that, people think the ocean is the ocean. No, it is not the ocean. And
Which one?
getting out there and you feel that,
Yeah.
it's all of a sudden it throws you off so much. And you
I
would
think
think those long durations have less effect to be. No, if you're used to that short Gulf of America duration, it can be just as confusing for you.
I want to interrupt just to say something, like to elaborate what you were talking about, getting people into the industry, and you're talking about the technology on the boats itself, but also just the lifestyle on the boat. I think when people think, oh, I'm going to go work offshore, I'll be disconnected from everyone. I won't see anybody. I won't talk to anyone. There won't be anything to
Oh,
do.
we lost you a little bit there, Ashley.
Oh, can you hear
But
me?
sounded like
Well, I
you.
was still hearing her. With today's technology and
Well, I was just saying
communications,
they have
there's a lot.
computers and TVs and there's
Yeah.
gyms and there's food, and it's kind of
Depends
like,
on the company and the boat that you're on, whether you've
yeah,
got room to have workout equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but some boats do. Obviously, the bigger the vessel, the more likely you're going to have an onboard gym, if you will.
yeah.
Some of the big boats that I've been on, 300-foot construction vessels, it's like a hotel
I
inside.
know. So it's pretty
And
seamless and it's easier out there now, I feel like, right?
yes, in that sense, it is.
Mhm.
You're still disconnected from actually seeing the people, but you do have TV and we've got communication uh, today that we didn't have even 10 years ago. Um, and from a personal point of view, 30, 40 years ago, we didn't have automatic banking like we have now. So you'd go offshore for 3 months and, hope you can get your electricity turned back on when you get home.
Yeah.
You know, it's different now. You just put it on auto pay and everything's still on when you come home.
And you can check it while you're on there because most of the
And you
vessels have
can't,
Wi-Fi.
yeah, yeah, you can see what's in your bank and what's
Yeah.
not.
I
So
just when I went on one of the vessels back when I first started AMSA, I just thought that was so interesting because in my mindset it was, just like when you used to fly and you didn't have Wi-Fi and you were totally disconnected. I just assumed that's how vessels were, and that was not the case. And I just thought that was interesting.
I think that was the case until about 20 years ago
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
when we started. And that was probably true for every aspect of our society is that,
Yeah.
um, well, the kids I went to school with, high school, if we had cell phones, I'd still be talking to them. We didn't have them. And everybody's number changed as you move around the country. Now you take the same cell phone number from here to Alaska, it doesn't matter.
But if you
Yeah.
ask my children, I still don't get text messages when I'm flying anymore. No one can reach me. All I'm able to do is watch movies on my phone. I don't know. It's weird.
Well, I think you'd say that most of the time, actually, there, Ashley. So I don't know about when you're flying. I think that's a little bit too limited there. Uh,
But anyway, that was just something I wanted to point out because I just think that's another fascinating
well,
thing.
but
Well, now you can stay quite connected, but of course, it is important to stay busy when you're out there. And I don't mean on your phone playing games or doing social media. I mean actually working. It just makes the time go by faster. And this goes back to, maritime history, if you will. You don't want a crew just sitting around being bored. You'll have a mutiny on your hands. You do want to keep people busy, but it is nice to be out there uh, and be able to check with the family, see
yeah.
what the kids are up to. You may not be there for the ball game, but you can be there virtually in a sense that we couldn't do even a few decades ago.
Hmm. Well, let's take that the other way then. What do you think you see in the maritime and the offshore industry in 5 years or 10 years down in the future?
A lot more computers. I'm not sure I can go with the idea of, unmanned super tankers going across the ocean. That just kind
Me neither.
God, no.
of
Not
scares
yet.
me a little bit.
No.
We got a long ways to go. We're still working on getting trucks that don't run over people, without drivers
Yeah.
in them. So there's a long way, but I would say 50 years from now, that's a real possibility. It's
Maybe.
something that they're going to get better at. Uh, some of the technology that they're using that the old companies are using to monitor wells, it's probably going to end up in the maritime industry, and some of it already has, to where they're monitoring stuff that's, you know, far away. Right now, there's in New Orleans, there are buildings where they're sitting there and they can open and close wells, valves, and flow lines and on platforms, 100 miles offshore. Well, that technology and communication is working its way into the maritime industry, and I think automation is probably going to be the biggest change.
Uh,
We're still going to have people on site, I think.
I think so as well, and I think as I don't think we see an offshore industry anytime in my lifetime where you see it's a peopleless industry. So I see this is still a great industry to get into. I do think it's something that, yeah, you're going to have to be technologically inclined,
There's
and
going to be more technology.
I
Yeah.
think that is a good benefit of the industry. It's certainly going to make it safer. I think it's also going to make the mariners that participate in this industry, they're going to have more assets where they can transition to other industries just as well too. So,
And that is a good point because as the automation is more pervasive in different industries, it's going to become more similar and transferable. Right
mhm.
now, I guess the oil field experience I had would be a better example, but wireline, for instance, nobody
Yeah,
knows what that is outside of the oil field.
yeah,
Nobody knows what you're talking about, and any experience you got with it means absolutely nothing at the grocery store, for
yeah.
instance. And it's a very technical. There's 6,000 tools you can run on wireline. There's an awful lot of stuff you can do on boats that people don't. It just doesn't translate into other disciplines. As we become more technical, I think obviously the computers are going to change some of that to where it'll be more. What's the word I'm looking for?
Maybe more,
Not autonomous.
Not
maybe more
autonomous, no,
universal,
more
more,
universal, more
yeah,
transferable.
yes, yes. So I know that when you and I got to spend a lot of time together up on the East Coast, and we spent time doing around the offshore wind industry. What do you think about that industry from a maritime perspective? Not from an energy perspective. That decision will be made elsewhere, I think. But from a maritime perspective, what did you notice about offshore wind?
It's it's complex and it involves a lot of the construction, but a lot of the construction appears to me, and it's just my opinion. I'm not an expert in this area at all, but a lot of what we've done in the Gulf of America with platforms over the last since the early 50s, late
Hmm.
40s,
Hmm.
is very similar to what they're doing up there.
Yes. You know,
Apparently, we don't have the vessels to do it, some of the construction at this point, but we've taught a lot of the rest of the world how to build stuff offshore. It's certainly in U.S. waters, and I think U.S. people and shipping companies, boat companies, need to be involved more than they are right now. Now instead of pumping oil to the beach, you're pumping electricity down the cable.
it's that is kind of interesting because that I see a lot of similarities too, and there's a lot of what the even even when the vessel is doing something slightly different, when its industrial mission is different, the engine room's doing the same thing. You know,
Yeah, the engine room hasn't changed.
so even when it is different, it's still the same. And yes, I definitely agree that there are, a few assets, maybe 5% of the fleet that is necessary for offshore wind that we don't have in this, but that everything else that's in that industry is stuff we have and stuff we pioneered doing here in the Gulf. So it should be U.S. So definitely agree with that and see that a lot. So, I think that's a very good point. And one that I think too few people understand about the industry.
Yeah, there are some similarities between, well, anytime you got an installation offshore, there's going to be some similarities. Whether you're pumping oil, pulling garbage out, which is one of my favorite little things that I'm side thing I'm working on right now, which I'm going to make a quick plug
Of
for the
course.
ocean cleanup.
You should
The
have like a little piece of paper you can hang up with the.
Yeah, there you go. See my picture.
We can
The
definitely, yeah, we'll
Pegasus
figure out.
Ocean project is probably. We're hoping we can get the stuff built in the United States.
Good.
It converts trash to oil, fertilizer, and other stuff. And again, the boats are still boats. What's the difference?
Yes, definitely agree. And look, I think it's from that perspective and just from oceans are a resource. We need to take
Absolutely.
care of them.
It's
From that
food,
perspective as
it's
well,
minerals.
yeah, I love this
Great.
project, and you've talked to me about it before, and I think it's a very important one, and I hope to see it work out because
I hope
it's
it
something
works
we
out
need.
too.
Yes,
It's in its very embryonic stages at this point.
yeah,
That's
I
cool.
know, but we need to get it moving there because it is something that is very
Long
important.
story short, there is a garbage patch floating in the Pacific, and there are several around the world, but there is a plastic patch about the size of Texas,
Yeah,
about halfway between Hawaii and California. And I don't think a lot of people know about it. I didn't for a long time. I only recently, really recently, in the last couple of years, found out about it. It's huge. Now, one man's trash is another man's treasure. It can be converted to useful stuff, from fertilizer to jet fuel.
I love it. I love it. So well, that leads me into a great place because my next question was going to be, you know, what gives you hope about the U.S. maritime industry? What really what makes you excited about the U.S. maritime industry?
Oh, might get a little political, Aaron. I
Well,
have
that's
hope
that's why
that,
we have Ashley and Angelle here.
Nope,
yeah,
I'm only
okay.
supposed to stop Aaron. You can say whatever you want.
I can talk about it. Okay.
I'm only in charge of him, and that's hard.
You got your hands full on that one, right?
Yes.
I think the current administration is more attuned to supporting American workers in general. And I think the maritime industry in America is going to benefit as well. I certainly hope so. From a defense point of view, I think we need a merchant marine. From a mercantile point of view, I think we need our own merchant marine. And, merchant mariners, ships are ships. Okay. I don't care if it's got guns on it or if you're carrying cargo, you still got to know how to run a ship. Well, if you got a bunch of merchant mariners and you start needing Navy personnel, you've already got a merchant marine base to pull from that you can upscale in a hurry. From a military point of view and vice versa, the other way around. We have people in the merchant marine that started out in the Navy. And ironically, the Army actually has more boats than the Navy, but that's a whole nother deal.
Everyone in the Army
Start
I've
count
ever talked
landing
to
craft,
from a
and
maritime perspective
they
loves
got
to use
more
that. Yes.
aircraft than the Air Force, but they don't have the fancy jets. Their missions are very different.
You know,
But the bottom line is whether you're talking about this plane or this boat or that boat, the skill sets are similar and can be moved over to that need at the
Mhm.
time without going through like Kings Point. It's a 4-year program. Now they accelerated it during World War II down, I think it was 18 months or so that they were actually punching out officers.
Yeah,
They were
somewhere
losing
there
so
in it.
many
Yes.
of them so fast that, Maine Maritime and Massachusetts Maritime Institutes, they couldn't keep up with putting it out. And that's why the U.S. government got involved in training merchant mariners. And that's what the Merchant Marine Academy is there for at Kings Point in New York. And of course, we've got the Coast Guard Academy, but it's all, and they're kind of like what I was talking about. They can be transitioned in the Navy if needed. They have a separate mission, which is also very important from the country's security point of view.
Definitely. And look, I mean, Colonel Fossum's going to kick my ass if I don't mention that Texas A&M Maritime is on equal footing.
I'm sorry. Yes, I didn't mean to leave him out.
No, we
I
can't.
was
We
scared
can't
of what
do
you were
them
going to come after that, Aaron. I was like, oh
I'm
gosh,
sure there's got to
there's
be
the
a
delete
Maritime
button.
Institute in California or over in the Northwest somewhere that I'm not
Cal
familiar
Maritime
with.
is good, but
Cal Maritime?
We do
Okay.
a lot
yes,
with Texas A&M. They're just good
yeah,
people.
Do
and
you?
as a
Yeah.
personal friend, I got to mention Texas
Yeah,
A&M
you better.
because Colonel Fossum is a great dude and is really interesting. But no, I agree. You know, we have seen the shipbuilding office within the White House, and it was stood up within the National Security Council, which I think is very important. That it could have been stood up in the National Economic Council or the National Security Council. And the shipbuilding office was stood up in the National Security Council for that reason. And I think that's a very good point, and it's very good. Now, I won't say that this administration or the Republican Party has a monopoly on great maritime supporters. We've done a lot with John Garamendi, who is a great supporter of the U.S. maritime industry, the lead Democrat on the American Offshore Worker Fairness Act, Mark Kelly. Apparently, all I can do is mention astronauts in the last 5 minutes here because of Colonel Fossum is an astronaut, and now Senator Mark Kelly is an astronaut, but introduced the SHIPS Act. So I don't think it's exclusive to the Republican Party, but I definitely agree that we are seeing a lot of great signs from Washington on maritime. I don't know. I suppose I should translate the metaphor into something maritime, but we now need to make sure we land the plane. And get something.
Dock the boat.
You really messed that one up, Aaron.
Dock
I'm
the
very
boat.
disappointed in you.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you both there. I appreciate that.
We all looked like all things to mess up. That one.
That was very
Sorry,
simple.
I mentioned planes earlier. Maybe I set the stage.
He
Well,
also geeks out about planes.
I do geek out about planes. You're right. So I know we are keeping you from your sailboat, and for that I apologize. So I want to make sure we're respectful of your time. But
It's a pleasure to be here. I actually finally put faces to the names I've been talking to for some time. It's kind of nice.
Well, it is great, and we are so happy that we can have our listeners here putting your face with your name and the great story that you have and this cool industry that we have here. So I just want to first turn it over to Angelle and to Ashley to see if they have any kind of key thoughts or summaries or key takeaways that they've had. And then I'll turn it over to Captain Rick to do the same here and give him the last word. So, Angelle, kind of what was the key takeaway for you today?
So I heard you talk about your time in the industry and your relationship with other and younger mariners. How have you? What has been the biggest change in the industry that you've seen that you think is great for the industry?
Biggest change in the maritime industry. Of course, I've only been involved in the maritime side for about 15 years, exclusively the vessels. I don't know if you really, I guess you could call the floaters and some of the platforms part of the maritime industry. I know you could actually get sea time on some of the offshore, especially the jackup rigs, because they're technically a vessel per the Coast Guard.
Yes.
When they're jacked up, they're not. But I would say that technology is probably the biggest change that I've seen throughout the maritime world. And we're talking about Gulf of Mexico and now Gulf of America, because it was known as the Gulf of Mexico for such a long time. The technology, both in the petroleum production and in vessel control, and I mean, look at the satellite systems we have for navigation now. That's been a huge change. My first thoughts to most kids in school today, if they're interested in a maritime, is pay attention in school because you're gonna use this geometry. Yeah, we got fancy GPSs on the boats and plotters and everything else. But what if your electronics go down? You're gonna need everything you learn in school, particularly the math and science,
It's a good, very good point.
to save
Yeah.
your life,
Yeah.
potentially. You want to pay attention to the weather. We got great weather reporting systems compared to even 20 years ago now. But, it's important to be able to look at the cloud and say, something's coming,
Yeah.
or feel it in the seas. And this is another thing that you're not going to get without actually being there. The Polynesians could actually navigate because they could feel the waves bouncing off of islands. Of course, they use stars too,
Hmm.
but the differences in the seas, like Aaron, like you were talking about with with
Those
the
West
Atlantic
Coast.
being different from the Gulf. That's how they navigated.
Yeah.
It just boggles
Yeah.
my mind.
That is
I
cool.
don't know if that answers your question, Angelle, but that's some of the technology is probably the biggest difference I've seen in the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah, that definitely answers my question. And it kind of also geared towards, yes, we're moving towards technology, but we still need to be sure that we know how to use everything manually as well.
Yeah, because your four function calculator or even your fancy scientific calculator might not be available.
Hmm.
Well, what we've learned today is technology will give out at some point, and you need other plans.
Yes, it definitely will.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the technology necessary to run a podcast can give out, I
Yeah,
certainly think
then anything
the
can. So
technology
see,
necessary to run a vessel can give out as well. That's a very good point. Thank you. Ashley, any other takeaways or key points from today for you?
no, I think while Angelle was talking, I was thinking about this. One is I'm very excited about the Christmas tree. Did not know that's where it came from. He always loves to laugh at that. And then two is I just truly love what you said about when you tell people find what you love because I feel the same way. I, I genuinely love working at AMSA and I love our members and I really go like we were on vacation this past week. We brought the kids to spring break and he and I both worked every morning answering calls, getting things done, not because we had to. I mean, we were on vacation, but because people needed us and we wanted to help them. So because we like what we do. And I think that's something really important that in today's society we get lost in certain things, and that's something that you have to constantly remind yourself.
Very good point. Yeah.
Now,
And
working with
then
Aaron, it's hard. However,
there are
I
tons of
love
rewards.
everybody else.
There are great rewards, as Angelle and Ashley both know. There are tons of rewards with working with me as well.
Name one.
I know, name it,
I'm
name it.
staying out of this.
You get to be on a podcast.
We get to
Oh,
make
there
fun
you
of
go.
you and not get in trouble.
That is yes. Well, Captain Rick, what anything you want to point out again, or make sure the audience knows what is your key point from today?
I think it's. I've enjoyed being here. Let me say that first. Um, I'm I like being. I'm glad to be part of bringing this information out to more people. I think, as you said, Aaron, earlier, a lot of people don't realize. Well, and you know what? I can reflect on that. I can identify with that very easily because before 1980, I had no idea that stuff was going on that I could have gotten involved with. I graduated from high school in 71. So there was 9 years that I know people that started as soon as they got out of high school. I didn't know about it.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's probably true of a lot of people in the United States today is that, okay, we know they're going up there and getting these crabs off of Alaska, but, I really don't. It was really cold and, it's one of the most dangerous jobs going. That's all there is about maritime, and I don't want to be involved. And there is so much more.
Yeah.
My mother knew me best. She tried to get me to go to one of the maritime academies. And, when I was 18, I realized there weren't any girls on ships then. So that was a no-go. But, I look back on it now. Mom knew where I wanted to be, where my heart was. And I wish I had gone to sea, if you will, worked on boats sooner in my life. I'm glad I found what I enjoy doing, and I would love if this ends up helping other people realize that there is a maritime in the United States. There is a maritime industry that you can go to. It's not impossible to get into. You don't have to know somebody. Got to make applications like everybody else, and it's good to bring a skill set with you. And today, that skill set more than anything else is something to do with computers, understanding the technology, and that'll open all the doors.
I really like those points, and I thank you for making them. And again, I appreciate our friendship. I appreciate your knowledge. It's always good to get a chance to see you and talk to you again. So I really appreciate you coming on, and I think you've been a great first host for this audience. And I also want to thank our audience for listening. And if anyone out there has people that we should interview or has topics you would like us to cover, please let us know. I think we got some great guests coming up. In fact, our next show, we're going to have John and Cooper Fontenot. Some great stories that I think people will be really surprised to hear and really interested to hear. So I hope everyone will tune in and hear us. If you like the show, please subscribe, obviously. Share it with any friends that you have. If you want to learn more about Captain Rick, learn more about AMSA, you can find us on Instagram or YouTube on Offshore America, or Facebook or LinkedIn at Offshore Marine Service Association. Again, thank you, Captain Rick, Ashley, Angelle. Thank you for making fun of me.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad I could help.
And next time I will do better about making fun of you more.
All right. We also hope that by the next episode, you stop repelling technology. That would be appreciated. All right. Well, thank you all and everyone. As I always say, please be safe. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.